And welcome back to another episode of the Geek Centurions. It's me, your boy, La.
You Joe.
Yeah, and we're reviewing the Eternals.
Yep. Another Marvel movie of this year because I think.
First one was Shang-Chi.
Yeah, Shang-Chi.
Venom, but I mean, like, you can question that.
Yeah, it's not really part of the MCU.
I mean, isn't it though now?
I mean, it's a wait and see game.
I mean, aside from that, so we knew we were gonna get Eternals, and so we're just gonna talk about it. And so if you never don't know how this works, we usually give our thoughts on the film. Then we give a quick 1 minute review, and then we continue our conversation from there. And so that's what we're gonna do. So obviously, we're gonna have to talk about how this is probably another one of the examples from Marvel, like taking a gamble with some characters, because this is coming from a fan of Marvel who's read a good amount, not everything, but a good amount, a decent amount, and that is, this is a hard group of characters to sell. I often always compared it to, like, this is Jack Kirby's, he also made The Third World, which is basically New Gods, Darkseid, Allfather, Orion, all that stuff. This is kind of like the discount version from Marvel. Eternals, I mean, you can see a lot of similarities in those, each franchise, DC and Marvel's, those group of characters. I mean, Orion and Icarus are probably the best examples of that. And of course, everyone knows Darkseid.
Yeah.
He is the, like, pinnacle character for evilness in the DC universe. Like, he is the Thanos, but he's, like, a lot worse than Thanos.
Thanos, even in the comics lore, only really becomes sort of a massive threat when he decided to get all the Infinity Stones. Darkseid is already super strong without any sort of magic MacGuffins.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I
yeah, and so a lot of the characters related to Darkseid are evidently more popular than, like, they're not popular, but they're more popular than the Eternals.
They're probably more well established in their corresponding comic universe than the Eternals are to the mainstream Marvel universe.
Yeah, and so that was always going to be the challenge. And I remember hearing some people being like, "Oh, they're going to fail because, like, this and that." And I'm like, I think the movie's going to be fine because it's Marvel movies. I think even still adapting this group of characters is a very difficult challenge. And now we have Chole Zhou, who is, like, an Academy Award-winning director. Sorry, and I'm just gonna say this right now. Yeah, she kind of deserves that award, because I'm gonna say right now, some of the shots and some of the cinematography in this movie is really well done, in my opinion. I don't know, Joey's is a big thing.
I mean, there definitely are some moments that do look visually impressive and stuff.
But for me, it's some of the Celestial stuff.
Yeah, the way they use the Celestials, they definitely sort of show off.
I mean, if I were to compare it to, it'd be like Guillermo del Toro doing, like, Pacific Rim, and how, like, every time the Jaegers, the big mechs, move, you felt weight. Like, you would see it walk, and everything shook. The camera shook, the wall shook. You felt that weight. Now, in this, like, well, I wouldn't say you can feel the weight, but you can feel the scope of how big they are. Like, they can fill the whole screen.
Yeah. I mean, heck, I think the first Eternal that we get a mention of, what's his name, Arash? Or
let me just pull up the names real quick. But yeah, it's something with an E.
But yeah, I mean, the first time you see that Celestial, like, you just straight up just see its face. And then, like, later in the movie, you get the full scale of just, like, how ginormous the Celestials are, that like even they're like, when you compare them to the size of like say any regular person, you can barely see them. They're just like a dot, while the Eternals are just this huge giant cosmic being and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, this movie definitely gets into some cosmic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's
Arishem,
Arshem, yeah, that's what it is.
the judge. So that makes sense as to why he says stuff later on.
Yeah,
and it's fun to see how all these things go around. But now I think one thing that I think we need to talk about is the reviews, and a lot of people tend to be talking about this movie. We're not going to go into all the reviews, but essentially, this is probably the most mixed reception of a Marvel film since maybe Captain Marvel.
I mean, I guess, because I think I saw, I guess, the response to this from like various review aggregate sites being from like ranging in the 50 to 60 ranges.
Can I just say I do not agree with those?
I mean, yeah. I mean, to be fair, like sites like Rotten Tomatoes are always iffy because again, they aggregate reviews. They aren't review sites themselves. They just take the various reviews that are out there on the internet and try to compile them all together to give a comprehensive score. But obviously, like, all those, like, it's not taking into account like what all the various reviews say or their various problems, because obviously people will have different reasons to score a movie as a 7, right? Some people will be like, hey, I like this movie and I rated it 7 because of such and such. But it's like, well, I don't agree with you for that, but I still rated it a 7, but I rated it because of these things. And it's like,
And okay, so obviously it's kind of interesting to see all that, and like at least know that, hey, just because it's bad on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't mean it's like bad in general. But we will be talking about our reviews, so obviously how we do it, we just do each other 1 minute. And Joey, you can start us off with your thoughts on this movie.
All right, so The Eternals is probably one of the more ambitious Marvel projects out to date. They, following this group of cosmic beings who come to Earth to protect humanity from the deviants, these weird monster things that feed on intelligent life. And they have this sort of process of like, we can help humanity, but we won't interfere with their natural progress, right? And yeah, it's a pretty large ensemble cast. I think you mentioned earlier, great cinematography. I think really good acting. But at the same time, I feel like this movie sort of feels really long and has some moments that feel very bloated. With some it feels like unnecessary stuff, but at the same time, there are various sections that work. When this movie tackles its themes, sometimes it gets it right on the mark and it's very interesting, and other times it feels a bit like a slog.
All right. I guess that leaves just me. Obviously, for me, Eternals is a fine outing, and I do agree that this is a movie that is trying to break away from the Marvel mold by doing something new. Whether or not it exceeds on that is totally dependent on you as a person. For me, I think it did fine. I think it could have been a little bit better. They established certain things that make sense not only into the Marvel universe, but also within the characters. Sadly, I do feel like it's bloated, and oftentimes a lot of the attention is taken away or ignored. I wouldn't say ignored, but it's not focused as well. I do feel that this movie could have been paced better, but there's a lot of stuff around there. And even if you want to really deep dive into a film, I think there's a lot for it to take. But I would have to agree that it could have been done a little bit better. I don't hate this movie. I think it's fine.
All right.
And so, what would your points be?
How would I rate it?
Yeah.
I think I would give Eternals probably having given enough time to gestate it in my brain, probably like a 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like seeing I don't think seeing the how I guess various sites sort of aggregate the reviews influenced me, because I don't think that really counts much. Because I feel like some people are gonna try to justify this and try to call this like the worst Marvel movie yet.
I don't agree with that.
And I wouldn't agree with a statement like that, because I feel like I feel like probably the least like at least my least favorite Marvel movie was probably like Thor 2. And I think a lot of that one just came through just with like, I think from the marketing, and he was wanting to be dark and serious, but didn't have that right tone for what it was doing, and it mainly felt like a stepping stone for. It felt like more like setup rather than a movie for itself, which I think when it comes down to, I think what people feel like the common, I wouldn't say common, but for people who don't like the MCU, I feel like the Thor: The Dark World is sort of like how they would assume an MCU movie to be, just full of jokes, campy, and just there to set up a cinematic universe or whatever. And Eternals doesn't feel like that to me at all. Like, I mean, obviously it has those moments of like setups and stuff. I mean, Kit Harington's character is kind of like there more or less as sort of a background character for a little bit. He does have, a bit of a character, and it has a connection to one of the Eternals, I think, series. Cersei, yeah. And he does, it's Kit Harington, so of course his character is going to have a much larger role within the universe, as we will come to learn eventually, because I don't exactly know
what that I informed you.
Yeah, I didn't know at the time, because I just thought it was a bit bizarre that Kit Harington is in here for like maybe 15 minutes at most. But I mean, yeah, he is a pretty substantial character in the MCU. He's playing a substantial character in the MCU. But yeah, no, I feel like more if this film does like, if anything, wants to break out of the Marvel mold. It doesn't it doesn't like fully jump into various like, I guess, the comedic aspects of like other Marvel movies, because there are jokes here and there and stuff.
Some of them land pretty well.
Yeah, but it's more about like, I guess this movie feels more like about like taking the idea of like what the Eternals are, these characters who, they essentially, given the background of what they are characters who come and sort of kind of like protect humanity for a little bit. And I love the way they established that in the movie, with like, because one of the characters' name is Icarus, another character's name is Gilgamesh. There's a character named Thena, who like some people call her Athena. Yeah, and they established early on, like, yeah, all these like legends and myths about these monsters and creatures and like heroic figures and people of myth and legend. These are them. They've always been there. They are true, and they've had like a sort of, effect on people. And you can see how they essentially like help inspire the world to do a lot of the stuff. Heck, the first people they meet will eventually become Babylon. Yeah, they land in Mesopotamia, sort of what is seen as sort of the cradle of civilization. And like, there's various flashbacks where we see them in various other ancient civilizations. I think the Gupta Empire in India, the Aztecs in Mexico and stuff. So yeah, we do see them sort of go around the world, sort of helping out, protect them from the deviants, but as well as just help them advance their cultures and stuff. Within reason. Within reason, yes, because the head Eternal throughout all of this, Ajax, played by Salma Hayek. Yeah, Salma Hayek, yeah. It's sort of like, we cannot interfere in any of their battles or wars or whatever. You need to let them have their natural course. Sure, we can give them technology, but not like, give them like super advanced stuff super early on.
It's like if you were to travel through time and you showed a guy who like from like the 1840s, be like, hey man, this is an iPhone, and they're like witchcraft and that kind of stuff.
I don't think.
Well, not with you know what I'm going with.
Yeah.
It would blow their mind.
Yeah. It would be kind of crazy for them for something like that to happen. Yeah, that's sort of like, I guess, the sort of theme that the movie goes for. At least from what I got from it, is just sort of like, all right, so what are the consequences of this, and what happens? What's sort of these moral dilemmas, because the various characters of the Eternals have like these dilemmas of like, we must not interfere, but some of the Eternals do sort of get attached to humans.
Yeah,
and sort of like, I want to protect them. I want to,
like there's something about humanity that like intrigues us, these godlike beings.
Yeah, and it's like, I want to help them become the best they can be.
Yeah, it's a very it's like one of those things that I've always liked about Superman. Is like, yeah, he's like this godlike being, but he wants to be human. Like he envies humanity because of the stuff they're able to do, and and stuff. I mean, it's a common trope in most stories, even in comic books, but you kind of get why, and it's established especially for one character, because we see this one character really love humanity, and that's how most of them see it, especially when they spend time with them. And there's a moment with another character who wants to help them, but then he sees like the sort of horrors that humanity is capable of, even questions whether or not we should help them.
Yeah,
and like that was like, for me, that's a scene that really stuck to me. And that's why I feel like, hey, this could be really good. By the way, I didn't give my rating. I feel like it's at least an 8, but I'm willing to admit that there's a lot of problems with this movie.
Right.
Because like, here's the thing: you talked about it bloated. Because on the ride back, we were talking about like, there's something like, it's not terrible, but something feels off. And you said it's the way it was edited, or
more like it's the way it's structured.
Yeah.
Not necessarily editing wise, but just how the movie goes about its ways, because we sort of jump back and forth between sort of the modern day, like happening now, of the Eternals sort of like coming together again to stop this new existential crisis of the Earth. But we get like these flashbacks to when they were, traveling around the world in ancient times, helping defeat deviants and stuff. And a lot of those segments, at least for me, like felt like really long. Like they take up like a good chunk of the movie, of just like, we're here in one bit, various character discussion, and then we like just jump right back to modern times in like, they're almost kind of used as like transitionary scenes almost, because like as soon as like as soon as the flashback starts, but when it ends, like the characters are all in like a different place, like, because essentially it's them having to round everybody up again. So oftentimes it feels like, I feel like it's half explaining like who these characters are and like what happened to them over the course of like all human history and stuff. And I mean, like, and I don't think it's necessarily bad, because a lot of those flashbacks are inherently interesting, because it is kind of like neat to see like I guess depictions of stuff like ancient Babylon, and like various other ancient cultures in sort of a big screen setting. It's kind of neat to see that, and
and also to see like aspects of like, oh, this is where they got that story.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, there's a character named Gilgamesh. There's a point where like, yeah, that story of Gilgamesh where he fights like this monster. This is that.
Yeah.
Like this is that scene, and it's early in the movie, and I'm like, wow, that's like super cool. And like, you could argue that a lot of the stuff that they've done has influenced culture and all that kind of stuff, and it's sort of like, like they learn from us, we learn from that kind of situation. And I mean, like, for me, like, it was really weird too, because like, I love the flashback scenes more than the scenes in the present, because like they were just so interesting, and I think that's where like a lot of like the character of these characters really shined, especially with someone like Cersei and someone like Icarus, and even Brian Terry Henry's character, whose name I'm forgetting.
Isn't it Festus or something?
Festus, yes.
Yeah, which I'm assuming he's supposed to be Hephaestus.
Yeah.
Because he's like the brains. He invents all the stuff and helps humanity he gives humanity technology every now and again. He gives them the tech boost sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's super. Yeah, I definitely think that the flashback scenes are definitely, I think, inherently more interesting because we see that sort of progression, and obviously the modern day stuff. And I don't think it's bad necessarily. It's just that a good chunk of it is the modern day stuff is just devoted to like we got to round everybody up again, get the gang back together, you know.
Mm-hmm. It's like we got to get a band.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like because this movie is like 2.5 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of like a lot of that sort of how this movie's structured, it really feels like it kind of drags in some areas because of sort of like the constant shift between the modern day setting and then having to jump through these extended flashback sequences of just seeing the characters and having them deal with like sort of the moral questions of like, are we really, is it really worth having to, is this really like our good, like a good enough mission of just like helping them advance, not helping them whenever there's like bad things happening to them, where we're just supposed to sit back and watch? Because I mean, this is a line from the trailer, obviously. Kit Harington's character is like, so why didn't you guys show up when Thanos showed up, or all the hundreds of wars and conflicts in human history? Mm-hmm. And Cersei's is like, I mean, we were told we couldn't because the Celestials said we couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, I think that's one of the best. I think that's one of the things that's well established, and you can see why and how that affects a lot of characters. Because there's like at least 3 examples of people being like, "Yeah, no, that's bull. We could easily help these people. Look at them; they're suffering, they're dying. If you just let me, like, no." The Prime Directive says,
yeah,
and it's funny how, that's throughout the film, and I think you're right because it feels very like weirdly structured because they're telling us this isn't that, and then they cut away into like, okay, this is them now. They were angry before, but I guess they're cool now, and it's really kind of weird for me. I think we did have a discussion like maybe this movie was meant to be like in 2 parts, or maybe that would have like affected it better.
Yeah, this is. I mean, I had this thought like, would it be interesting if this movie was a 2-part movie? Mm-hmm. Like the first part being for all this ancient, like what they did in the past, and sort of like it ends off with them going their separate ways, and then a second movie sort of like bringing them back together, and I think it could work, but I could understand why they didn't do something like that because, like you said earlier, the Eternals as characters are a hard sell to a mainstream audience, right? Like, granted, the idea of, I guess, other aliens coming to our planet to help develop our civilizations and stuff is not like super unheard of because there's a certain show on the History Channel that's made like 13 seasons of exploring that dumb question. I'm not gonna get into a rant about the Ancient Alien show, but
listen, it was fun at first, but now it's like calm the fuck down.
Yeah, like I think there was an episode where they're like, "What if Bigfoot is an alien, or what if we were Bigfoot and then aliens came and changed us?"
Was that really an episode?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that was an episode.
That sounds stupid.
They've done like they also done like at least 4 different episodes on the Easter Island heads, and they all come to various different conclusions. It's like I don't know that I'm not gonna get into it. We're talking about Marvel, but
yeah.
it had to be said because this movie does sort of dwell into that idea.
I mean, here's the thing. Jack Kirby is a big fan of mythology and all that kind of stuff, and it's not that hard to believe that he could have been into like the whole Chariot of the Gods kind of stuff. I mean, look back at Fourth World, Dark Side, Apocalypse, and New Genesis. They are the new gods. When the old gods died, the new gods came, and there's New Genesis. This is the All Father, who is like the one who's in charge of all the new the guys from New Genesis, like Mercury, and other characters like Orion. A lot of them borrow like a lot of names from mythology, and even in Eternals, you can hear that. You have Circe, you have Icarus. Sprite could be a reference to something else.
Yeah.
There's a character named Druid who sounds very much like Druid.
Yeah, and that's why I made a comment of being like, wait, so his name is spelled Druid, but if I feel like half the time they pronounce it Druid, as in like,
And we mentioned it earlier with Athena. They make a clear, connection that she was the inspiration for Athena, the goddess of war.
Yeah, like Sprite, I think, has a moment where she's like, "You are the goddess Athena, the god of war," or
Heck, one of the characters' name is Gilgamesh, who is like considered like the first epic hero.
Yeah, like the Epic of Gilgamesh is considered to be like the first, story that's been written down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, it's
you can see that, and especially like throughout all Jack Kirby's work, especially in the Eternals, it is like the core idea of what he always had. Heck, I've even heard like conversations that because Stan Lee and Jack Kirby made a lot of characters, the Fourth World stuff and the Eternals were mostly his idea. But, he even designed stuff like Galactus and, the Silver Surfer. And he often compared Galactus to sort of like a really godlike figure. This sort of like character who doesn't care. He just does, what he feels is, right. Or, that kind of stuff. Like a very, like, what you expect a god to do.
Mm-hmm.
And like Silver Surfer would be like his messenger, his angel, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you can see that in a lot of the characters he's helped develop. And seeing it here, you see that, especially with Icarus. Because, man, everyone makes jokes in this movie about Icarus flying around. Like, oh, yeah. So you're the reason that whole, like, Icarus flying to the sun. Like, yeah, that guy over there made that story up.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, that's cool. Also, the speedster's name is because it's a speedster character. It's a play on the name of like Mercury, like the messenger god who's gonna be real fast.
Yeah,
that's there.
Okay, all right, yeah, because I feel like they don't usually say their name. And, she's also was doing sign language.
Yeah, this is a very diverse cast.
Yeah. Is the actress mute?
Let me double check on that. Continue with your thoughts.
But yeah, no, yeah, I think those are some of the problems. I think I guess the other issue I had with this film, if you want to talk about issues, is the deviants themselves. Granted, not design wise, because I think they look pretty cool. It's more of like their use in the story, because they seem more like they kind of just get thrown to the wayside towards the end.
She was born deaf to hearing parents.
Okay, all right.
Oh, she's half Mexican.
Okay,
half African. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right, that is very interesting, and I guess it sort of makes sense to have sort of
He didn't even say that she taught everyone sign language.
That is true, because like they communicate mainly through sign language with her, obviously. So that's very interesting. But yeah, the deviants themselves, they have cool designs, but they definitely feel a bit underutilized in the story.
No, yeah, because there's they have a purpose in the story, but like they are essentially a tertiary group of people.
Yeah, they're like a secondary or tertiary threat, but towards the end of the story, which is sort of like kind of weird. I mean, they do have like some interesting moments with the deviants because they're like, wait, I thought we killed all the deviants, and they've come back and they are doing some weird shit, and it's like, and we learn sort of the origins eventually, and it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But by the end of the movie, they're just kind of like, it's like, all right.
Because I think the whole idea is that it's centered around more of the of the Eternals loving humanity and like wanting to protect it. So because there's a more prevalent threat, and that takes more center stage in the situation than the deviants ever could.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, like I don't disagree with you. It is very like weird because even I was thinking like, because there's a point where the deviant shows up, I'm like, why are you even here?
Yeah, I think even some of the characters like, wait, what the heck? What's going on? Wait, why are we having to deal with this mess?
Yeah. How do you feel about the Celestials?
I think they look pretty cool. I think you hit the nail right on the head. The way they're presented in this film, you really get the sort of the size, and I think I mentioned a little bit of it earlier. That you can like, there's like I think a shot of like when we get the full scale of Celestial for the first time, and just like seeing like how small our characters are compared to Urshan is just like, holy crap, that is
huge.
Yeah,
there's even a point where like we get like a whole view of Urshan compared to say a planet, and you're like, okay, so now we know what's gonna happen if Galactus ever shows up.
Yeah. I mean, Galactus isn't a celestial, but he is
he's around their size.
Yeah, and it's just like, boy, that's gonna be like, because I think I said it to you when we saw that sequence, and I was like, man, I guess now we know what how Galactus will fucking look like if he ever shows up in the MCU.
He won't be a fucking cloud.
Yeah, he won't be a cloud.
Which I was like, I was willing to forgive if he was like inside the cloud.
Yeah.
But then he was like, no, it's just the cloud.
It's just the cloud.
And I'm like, bullshit. That hurt. I want to see the man in the skirt. But I will say it's funny how like in the comics, especially with Kirby, they're kind of like more like a robotic look. Here, them look like they're made of stone.
Yeah, I think it's I guess it kind of maybe makes some sense because I guess Celestials were around since the dawn of
existence.
So I think they I don't know. I guess it's sort of thematically like they are stone and they make stuff and stuff like that. But yeah, no, it's certainly interesting. But yeah, I like how the Celestials are portrayed in this movie.
I mean, is there anything else you want to mention as we continue on?
Not at the moment. I think I gotten most of my, I guess, issues with the movie out.
No. Okay, so here is this. We talked about how it's just an aggravator and it doesn't, it shouldn't really convey your thoughts. But like, how do you feel about most people saying that, or feeling that this is like that low of a film?
I feel like, I don't know. It's
because like I'm not. I know we talked about it earlier, but what I'm saying is that I feel like this being a more like, because this is where I'm going with this question is essentially, this being a very different film than most Marvel movies. I feel like it kind of skewed a lot of people's thoughts on it, because like going in, you kind of already used to Marvel movies. We had like 10 fucking years of this stuff. One being like extremely different feels very off for some people. And now, don't get me wrong, like I said, there's like some issues. We talked about it with the structure feeling very off. That maybe this would have been better if it was a two-parter and all that kind of stuff. But there's moments where I'm like, yeah, there's some really good stuff going on. Like there's a scene with, like as I mentioned earlier, with Brian Tyree Henry's character that made me go like, fuck, I feel bad for him. And there's even a moment where like, oh, that's more fucked up than we thought.
Yeah.
But like, we'll see. I mean, like that's my take. I don't know about you.
I feel like it's very disingenuous to say that this is like the worst Marvel movie,
Mm-hmm.
because this movie has a ton of merit. I mean, we said it earlier. The cinematography is great. I think the acting is solid all around.
Mm-hmm.
The music, really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a moment where when it hit, that song hit.
Yeah. It's just sort of, I guess, execution wise, is sort of like where it kind of falls apart. Because, but they, it's that you can definitely tell there's some creative forces of wanting to portray this movie in this way.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like it's interesting because, and I feel like most critics of the MCU are kind of like, they're all the same. It's always the same stuff. It's like, why can't they do something more creative or interesting? And it's like, we kind of are getting like a more creative and interesting movie, like that sort of tries to break as much of the MCU mold as it can while still being an MCU movie. And
hey, listen, they're not all gonna be hits.
I mean, yeah, like it's taken what, like more than 10 years to get like one that actually, at least from, I guess, maybe from like maybe mainstream review sites being actually lower than like a 60% or whatever. That's kind of interesting, and I think it speaks more of like more to of the character, like sort of like the characters they chose for this movie, rather than more or less the MCU, like an MCU fatigue. Because I'm like, if anything, you feel like Black Widow would have gotten these types of reviews, right? Because I mean, that's what people were saying. With at least some critics were saying that, like, oh, it feels a bit too samey,
Yeah.
right?
But they don't try anything new.
Yeah, and then Shang-Chi, I'm pretty sure got some pretty solid reviews. So I mean, I don't think it's linked to anything like a Marvel fatigue or superhero fatigue in general.
No,
I think it's more of like, for some people, just this movie just wasn't like as interesting, or
it wasn't what they were expecting,
or what they were expecting. Right.
Because like for me, like I've been telling this to everyone who wants to go check out the Eternals, because it's one of those things where like they're interested in it, and I would tell them the Eternals are just a hard character to nail down. Like there hasn't been much with them, and if there was, it's just very kind of little. Because I think there's only like right now 3 big books, and I mean three big books. There are the only 3 books with them that I can think of, and it's the original Jack Kirby stuff, Neil Gaiman, and the one that's currently on with what's his name? He's written other books like The Wicked and Divine. I'm just gonna look it up real quick, but like that tells you how tough these characters are, because like almost no one really knows how to nail them. Because even the Neil Gaiman one, and Neil Gaiman is like one of the best known comic writers, and I'm not saying it was a bad bad book, but even he had some trouble trying to get it down, because he would do some stuff. I'm like, wait, what? Something about dreams and like all that stuff, and you just have to go with it,
right?
And here you kind of get the same kind of situation. But I mean, like, I still enjoyed it. I think it was fine. Kieran Gillian, that's what's the name. I was wasting time to get to that name, but essentially, I think this is probably a better thing that a lot of people can get into with the Eternals. I think I could have been executed a lot better though.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because I think
there is a story there in the movie.
Yeah, and there's elements and like themes and stuff,
and like when it hits, it hits.
Yeah,
and I think you're right in that it's really the pacing, and maybe it would have been better if they did it as a 2-parter. But like it all depends. We don't know if like they trusted it enough, or they didn't think of it at the time, or whatever reason they could have had not to make it a 2-parter. but we got at least a decent film out of it. And I don't want Marvel to not try something new, because I want them to try something new. When you read comics, oftentimes they're either standard or they do something really crazy with the character. Like, I always go back to this with the Hulk. Hulk, easy thing to know. He's angry. He's always angry. He's fighting some big giant monster. Hey, how about we take Hulk and do like a sort of horror vibe to him? Him doing some supernatural stuff and some like Cronenberg kind of transformations. And you know what? That's like one of the best selling Hulk books ever. At one point, it outsold Batman. And everyone's like, yeah, because he's an Avenger. Yeah. Hulk by himself doesn't sell as much against a Batman. If Hulk was able to beat Batman in sales, that means something.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm pretty sure the top 3 superheroes that sell in terms of merchandise and comics and stuff are like Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man.
Somewhere around those lines, yes.
Somewhere around the lines usually is like those are the top 3,
mm-hmm.
right? And it's up until recently have the Avengers characters themselves gotten high, because I mean, remember, Iron Man before the first Iron Man movie was a B tier character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was.
And that's being nice.
Yeah, and that's being nice. But now Iron Man is like up with the best of them. Like, every kid now who's grown up like before, like since Iron Man came out, knows who Iron Man is.
Yeah, ask any kid who grew up in the 90s,
and they'll be like,
"Who?"
Yeah,
they give him the Star-Lord. Who?
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely do think I think that like I think part of like why I guess the idea of maybe doing a 2-part movie, I think it is down to like just not being they probably weren't that sure, because like, and again, like you said, the Eternals are a hard sell, and
they're harder than Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
When I say there's only been 3 books, there's only been 3 books.
Yeah, so like
one with Kirby, Karen Gillian, and Neil Gaiman, and there are decades in between each one.
Yeah, so like when you have like that sort of like, when they're that unknown to a modern audience and stuff, you gotta like, I mean, I don't know, you gotta try your best. Try your best to make them at least mainstream appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I guess maybe the movie didn't do as well, but I think it does a lot to sort of show off these characters, and we at least it always seems like Marvel will always like back those characters to a certain extent, unless it's like really like not well reviewed, or I mean, look at like the Inhumans show. Right.
And that was handled by a different creative team too.
Yeah, I mean, we probably won't get Inhumans ever in the MCU, probably.
I mean, Kamala Khan is Inhuman, Miss Marvel. But they're probably like just like wavily like say she's not Inhuman,
or like she's Inhuman. What's that? It's
don't worry about it.
Look over there. What?
It's a bird.
Yeah, magic dust. Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, magic dust. Or in some cases, pocket sand.
Yeah, just like what the. Now enjoy the movie.
Yeah,
or whatever. But no, I think at the end of the day, I mean, Eternals was a sort of a gamble. I mean, when you look at the slate of Phase 4, all the stuff that's come out, including Disney Plus shows, like, yeah, this is sort of like the phase where Marvel is trying new and different things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I think we've had this discussion at least every time we talk about an MCU stuff, we always have this sort of tangent where it's like, hey, this is sort of the phase where Marvel is trying to, do something different. I mean, WandaVision is clearly different from most of the stuff, but we had the palette cleansers with originally Black Widow and
Falcon and the Winter Soldier,
but because of current world events, they had to get delays and various other things.
Mm.
And we would have gotten those as palette cleansers, and then we would slowly get into like some of the weirder stuff: WandaVision, Loki, What If to a certain extent,
Shang-Chi.
Yeah,
because Shang-Chi was like their kung fu movie, and for the most part, it landed.
Yeah, it landed pretty well.
Mm.
And here we have a space opera-esque historical fantasy epic movie or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, for some people that's going to be like super interesting and intriguing, and other people are like, "What is going on? I do not understand."
Welcome to comic books.
I am like, what is up with all this cosmic stuff? This is so weird.
Yeah, there's gonna be some, and this is gonna be another one of those movies where like, okay, I need to talk to my comic book friend and ask him who the fuck was that.
And then they'll be like, honestly, dude, I don't even know. And they're like, oh no.
And it's gonna be like, well, this is, and they're like, why did I even ask?
Oh yeah, or it's like, well, actually, this is all right. This is
right,
I'm
all
sitting here
right.
for 50 minutes.
All right, that's enough. I didn't need to add all that. I didn't need the life story of this character because, like, I will say there was in the mid-credit scenes they introduced like 2 characters, and I'm just like, oh, you crazy son of a bitch, you've done it. You brought that character, and you, oh, that is a comic accurate suit. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh yeah, I think I vaguely remember that guy.
Yeah, and then this one, the other one comes in, I'm like, oh, I at least know that character.
I know who that actor is.
I know who that actor is. That's the only reason you want to watch the next movie with that character, because you know the actor.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, I mean, obviously the mid credit scene, you know, does the whole "the Eternals will return" or whatever. So I mean, we might obviously Marvel definitely has at least some plan for these characters.
There has been a sequel announced, but like they're probably gonna take what they've done with this one and be like, okay, what can we do better? Because one, critics might not have liked it, but fans liked it.
Yeah, I think that might be sort of the general dissonance. It might be another one of those like fans are fine with it, but the critics are very sort of with it. But
like Godzilla versus King Kong,
right? Where critics are like, "Well, this is just a dumb monster movie," and all the fans are like, "That's exactly what we wanted. Thank you."
Thank you. I totally wanted to see Godzilla and Kong just beat the shit out of Mechagodzilla. That shit was beautiful.
It brings a tear to a man's eyes. But yeah, it's that could be just something. Because at the end of the day, I guess at the end of the day, a critical reception,
it doesn't mean that's what it is.
Yeah, because I mean, friggin' there's probably tons of cult classic movies and stuff that weren't well received back in the day, and only now are people like really into them.
Hank, you want to get a good example? Empire Strikes Back. That movie was mixed when it first came out.
You want an even crazier example?
What?
Citizen Kane. That movie, which is considered by various film buffs and stuff to be one of the greatest movies of all time, if not the greatest movie of all time, mainly because of film techniques and stuff, not necessarily the plot. But yeah, that movie was received as by critics at the time, but it was only through film analysis and like historians and stuff years later where it's like, no, this movie is actually really, really interesting and unique, and look at all the stuff they do with all the camera tricks and stuff. This is a groundbreaking movie, so
and there's the ones that are like, okay, it's a good film, but it's not the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah, and there's also that too. So like at the end of the day, opinions aren't facts, and you gotta decide for yourself whether you enjoy something or not. And for us, we thought this movie was all right.
It was all right.
Has problems, but it is nowhere near as bad as I think mainstream critics are saying. And I think most fans will sort of agree, yeah, it's all right. It's not like the worst thing ever. I mean, again, Thor: The Dark World is probably worse in terms of just like, in terms of like just how it's executed itself as well. At least here we get some good cinematography and sort of various interesting themes and like cool character moments and stuff.
I was also gonna say some visually striking stuff. But yeah, that was our thoughts on the film. If you enjoy what you heard, please sure to follow us on all social medias Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook are our most common ones. Instagram is the one we always use. At the Geek Centurions. If you go to Instagram, you'll find links to all of our sites that we are officially part of, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, all that good stuff, and a link to our YouTube where you audio listeners out there can put a face to the voice. And of course, we have a Patreon. It's been dry for the past few months, but that's fine. Anything helps. And now that's going to be it for the day. We both enjoyed Eternal, so hopefully you did too. We understand if you didn't. And yeah, that's it. That's the end of the episode. It's been your boy Eli.
It's me, Joe.
And we are the Geek Centurions. You guys have a good one. Peace.